You're very welcome along to the Matchbook Weekend Football Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined just by Mark O'Hare this week. So, Mark, firstly, the pressure is going to be on. There's no Adrian to bounce off ideas, see it in the sheet, maybe change your selection. I mean, it's all on you this week.
Yeah, I am feeling the pressure. I mean, what a life, eh? Just jetting off to Dubai for a week in the middle of the season. Amateur stuff from Adrian Clark there, but yeah, no, he's deserved it. So hopefully I can carry the can just on my own this week with your help, perhaps.
Yeah, well, League of Ireland stuff, but I've refrained from predicting League of Ireland. As I touched on you off air, I said I can't see any of the top three or all the top three winning on Friday night. It was that sort of season in the title race for anyone not familiar with it, and of course all the top three won. So that's me refrained. And I think the week you missed last year, I put up a selection in the Premier League with Adrian because he insisted on me doing one, and it definitely not just lost, but lost in a lot that I had a quick review to myself saying the people are listening for Mark and Adrian's selections, not mine. So yeah, looking forward to it, mate. But yeah, we're going to cover 5 games in the Premier League. It's a big weekend across Europe, and yeah, before we get going, it's just a reminder to people there's a £10 podcast bet builder money back special we'll get to in a second on the main game, Arsenal versus Liverpool. Spoiler, Mark's not predicting an entertaining game, but more on that in a second. Leicester Forest, good game Friday night. Villa Bournemouth, Brentford versus Ipswich, and Chelsea versus Newcastle. Insights.matchbook.com if you want a full recap, and if you can take 2 seconds wherever you're watching or listening, if you hit that follow, subscribe or like button, it would be much appreciated. So let's get going. We'll start with the main game, Arsenal versus Liverpool. I mean, this fixture should be goals, but we'll get into it, Mark. Arsenal 256 favourites, Liverpool 3.1. The draw is available at 3.45. Both teams to score, yes, 1.7. The Asian handicap line sees Liverpool get a quarter goal head start at 184, and the total for this game is 2.5, and overs is 189. Mark, start of the season, if I showed you those goal lines and both teams to score prices, it would be an automatic bet, I presume, on the over and both teams to score, yes. So these Arsenal injuries and the way sometimes Arne Slot sets up his Liverpool team, I guess in the first halves maybe in particular, it's just going to settle. It's going to be a cagey game, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think you set the scene quite nicely there for all the reasons why I think it will be a tight, cagey, close encounter, almost a must-not-lose approach from both teams. So obviously, we're still quite early in the season, so you don't want to be sort of making up too much ground. And Arsenal are already sort of behind the 8 ball after a couple of poor recent results. And yeah, I'm just not convinced this is going to be the blockbuster which we hope or have expected to see in the last decade or so when these two teams play against each other. Arsenal missing Saliba, Odegaard, probably Calafiori, perhaps Saka again, assuming he's out based on Arteta's comments midweek, and the market has reacted. Arsenal have drifted all week, really. Obviously, understandably so, because they've weakened the heart of that side, and recent performances haven't been completely convincing either, hence that drift. And you know, Shakhtar in midweek probably should have been more comfortable than it was. But last week at Bournemouth, Arsenal weren't as controlled as I've come to expect them to be in recent years or recent months, really, even before the red card, actually. And, you know, Declan Rice was quite right after the match to sort of say we need to start cutting out these silly errors, not just in terms of giving goals away, but the red cards, obviously. But I don't want to oppose Arsenal here. They have only lost 4 Premier League games in the last 42, going back to the start of 22-23. Have beaten Liverpool in back-to-back home fixtures. And as we've seen in the last 12 months, have raised their game in matches against Man City, albeit with a much stronger side than they'll have this weekend. But they are still a force. They just have to make some slight improvements. They've conceded in 5 of the last 6 Premier League games, which is not something we've come to expect from them. Saliba missing obviously weakens them there again. But I am prepared just to leave them alone and sit on the fence, really. Just back the draw as the outsider of the 3 main selections here, around 3.5. Liverpool do have a day's less rest to prepare. They're away on Wednesday night in Leipzig, so away and away again this weekend, whereas Arsenal, home Tuesday, home again on Sunday. That is a slight advantage for the Gunners. And yeah, as I said sort of last week and ahead of the midweek Champions League cards, Liverpool have been doing tremendously well. They've adapted superbly, haven't really put a foot wrong by the Forest match, haven't really been overly tested by sort of Chelsea perhaps last week, Leipzig in midweek too, both caused them a few problems. That match last weekend probably deserved to be a draw on balance of play perhaps, but you know, they still came through it. But yeah, it's hard to pick holes in Liverpool at the moment based on their start. But the narrative that we're being fed at the moment is this defence is imperious. It's one of the best we've seen in the Premier League for quite some time. I'm still not completely convinced in that. I know 3 goals against in 8 games is outstanding, irrespective of the opposition. But I do think there's an argument to say that it could have been more. And it might surprise you to learn that Liverpool have basically given away the same amount of big chances as Man City this season in the Premier League, more than Tottenham in terms of shot faced. City are facing fewer shots on target, fewer shots in the box. Spurs pretty much tracking alongside Liverpool in terms of the same sort of metrics as well. So that might sort of surprise a few people, but it shows that Liverpool aren't completely impenetrable, especially when facing elite attacks. And Leipzig could and probably should have scored in midweek as well. So kind of getting back to the game, we know that obviously the big matches that matter at the top end of the table have tended to be quite tight in recent years, quite cagey too. You mentioned Liverpool sort of making slow starts to matches too, and I think the longer this game goes on, sort of within that sort of draw bracket, the unders have to come into play too. So I'm just going to marry the two together and boost that price on the draw, because I don't have a really strong opinion on this game. It's quite a tricky one to unpack, but I'm quite happy to sort of put my money with the draw and under 2.5 goals and cheer on the 0-0 and the 1-1 at an inflated price. I don't think it should be the outsider of the 3 outcomes.
Okay, this podcast will work better if I disagree with most of Mark's selections, but I'm with him on this one. I think it's going to be cagey. Drawn under 2.5 goals. If you back that with Matchbook on the bet builder, it's a £10 money back special. You don't have to opt in or anything. You'll have an automatic free bet in your account Monday morning if the bet loses. So nice. I wouldn't say fun way to watch the primetime game, Mark, but look, I can only think of fun way. If it's a bad game, you get your money back. Or no, if it's a good game, you get your money back as a free bet. So drawn under 2.5 goals. If it's 0-0 or 1-0 with 30 minutes to go, I can see both teams settling for a point. Let's move on to Leicester versus Forest. Bit of a derby here. Friday night football. It's good to have Friday night football back. We haven't really had it all season, bar the opening weekend. Leicester 3-0-5. Underdogs to Forest, who are 2.6 favourites. Draws available at 3.4. Both teams to score, yes, 183. The Asian handicap line sees Forest, it's effectively drawn no bet, but Forest the favourites at 183, and the total for this game currently sits 2.5, close to 50-50. Unders the favourite at 1.9. Mark, going back to both these teams, I mean, the Forest Palace game is one game I couldn't really get my head around, because I watched the game. Both teams had claims of maybe being the better team and having chances at times, although I guess Forest overall probably shaded it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I didn't expect it to be quite as open and as expansive as it was. 40 shots.
A lot of shots. Yeah, a lot of shots.
Both teams had 20 shots, which is almost unheard of, really. Palace did hit the woodwork twice. Forest created arguably the better openings, 3 big chances, conceded none. And yeah, another good result, really, for Forest, because their City ground form under Nuno hasn't been as strong as perhaps it was under Steve Cooper, or anywhere close to being as strong as it was. They've been sort of thriving away from home, almost flip-flopping from where they were under Cooper. But yeah, this is an interesting game. The East Midlands derby is always a really good watch. Always feisty, a great atmosphere. I'm sure it will be again at the KP. Both clubs are actually sort of exceeding pre-season expectations at this point in time, and I think both will be pretty pleased with their progress. Leicester obviously were sort of marked down as the most likely team to finish rock bottom in the Premier League this season. They've now won back-to-back games. They've got 9 points on the board, actually closer to the top 6 than the bottom 3 in terms of points earned after the first 9 games, or 8 games, which is really, really quite impressive, actually. Which is, fair play to them, really. They sold their best player, the most creative player in the summer, lost their boss to Chelsea, had to wait until late in the window before doing any business because of the financial issues hanging over the club. And Steve Cooper's doing a really sterling job. Excuse me. But, that's as far as I can go, really, because they have overachieved, overperformed, really. If you look at the metrics, they've lost the shot battle and the non-penalty expected goals count in 7 of their 8 games so far. The win over Bournemouth at home was probably a good example of that. They lost the shot count 19-6 and won that game 1-0. They're taking the second fewest shots in the Premier League. Almost a quarter of their total shot count came against Southampton last week. And they're facing the second most shots and have allowed the second most big chances. So, my numbers say they're about sort of 2.64 points better off than they ought to be based on the balance of play so far. And that's why they are considered to be, reasonable underdogs or reasonable outsiders here at home to Forest, because based on the major metrics, if you plug that into an expected goals model, they should be a decent degree bigger than they actually are, And I know it's a small sample after just 8 games, but I do feel Forest are the more trustworthy of the two teams. So I'm going to back them with a double chance and under 3.5 goals, which comes in at 1.96. So we've got the 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 2-1 away victories, as well as the 0-0 and the 1-1 onside. And I mentioned Forest away form, but they've already been to Chelsea, Liverpool and Brighton, as well as Southampton. They're unbeaten in those 4 away days. They have the 5th best expected goals process away from home, despite that schedule, which is quite impressive, really. It's just 1 defeat in 8 this season, only 6 goals against, which is the fewest they've conceded at this stage of a top flight season since 1980. Only Liverpool and Villa have conceded a lower non-penalty expected goals figure. They rank 2nd in the division for fewest big chances conceded. They get Ward-Prowse and Gibbs-White back for this one too. So I think there's a decent chance they can avoid defeat in this game. And I just don't see this game escalating either. 7 of their 8 games have gone under, as have 3 of Leicester's 4 at the KP. So, yeah, tight, feisty, and Forest to pick up something from this game too.
Okay, Nottingham Forest on the double chance. Combine that with under 3.5 goals, 196. Support for Forest in the comments as well. Let's move on to Brentford versus Ipswich here and take a look at the betting we currently have on Matchbook. You can currently back Brentford, if you give me 2 seconds to get the prices up here, 172, Ipswich 5.1. The draw is available at 4.4. Both teams to score yes, 172. Ipswich are getting a 3/4 goal head start at 2.08, and the goal line is 2.5. Mark, it was easy to get excited by Ipswich at the start of the season. We've had a decent sample size. Where are you at with Kieran McKenna's side? Because they had a chance, I think, just before Everton went 1-0 up, that I thought if they score that, they might just win the game. Do you know what I mean? But once Everton got the goals, I felt Ipswich had nothing really to threaten going forward in the second half.
Yeah, I'm concerned with Ipswich. I felt they were the best of the bunch coming up from the Championship, and I didn't think the barometer was particularly high on the teams being promoted. I think all 3 were going to struggle, but I liked their opportunity to try and make a bit of a splash, and early signs suggested that perhaps they could. There's a lot to like about those kind of efforts early in the season, but yeah, it's wavered a little bit. The schedule has sort of got a little bit kinder, and they've not really stepped it up since. And the defeat at West Ham was quite sobering before the international break. Kieran McKenna wanted to use that break to move on from it, but I thought Ipswich were just as bad, actually, for large parts of that game against Everton. Just really ineffective in forward areas. They lost the shot count 8, shots on target count 8-2, which is quite alarming, really. And yeah, I've got questions about McKenna at the minute. I know he's a wonderfully talented young coach, and he's still finding his way in the top flight, but he has to start finding a settled defence to work with, because it's 8 goals conceded in 3 games now. And I know injuries are going to occur, but they're just lacking consistency. So in their 8 Premier League games so far this season, they've already started 2 different goalkeepers, 3 different right backs, 5 different central defenders, and 4 different defensive midfielders. That's just not ideal for team cohesion going forward. And they're back on the road here, so I do fear for them. They've allowed XG totals of 379, 249, and 166 away at West Ham, Saints, and Brighton in their last 3, giving up an average of 12 shots in the box. And Brentford haven't been shy in getting forward and putting teams under pressure at home this season. Goal totals of 2, 3, 1, and 5 at the Community Stadium. 10 points from 4 fixtures, beating all 3 of the bottom 3 already at home. And they've actually won all of their last 8 home games against promoted clubs as well. So happy to back them here. I think the price for them to win on the nose is absolutely fine, but we can boost it to odds against territory, 2.06, by ruling out the 1-0 and backing Brentford to win and over 1.5 goals. I thought they were pretty good for the most part at Old Trafford. Fell down a little bit in the final third, but I think they'll be targeting this game, as they have the likes of Southampton and West Ham, for example, and I think they'll be sort of gunning for Ipswich here. So I can see them scoring at least twice, and if they do, I think they'll win the game.
Yeah, shout out to Keith Andrews, set piece coach at Brentford, and doing a fine job there. Pinnock getting a free header in the middle of United's 6-yard box. Brentford to win and over 1.5 goals, 2-0-4. Let's move on to a team we haven't got right this season, not just Mark, but Adrian. And I think a lot of people, Chelsea at home to Newcastle, and Newcastle to a lesser extent as well, Mark. So best of luck here. Chelsea available at 185, and their favourites, Newcastle, 4.3, the same price for a draw. Both teams to score yes, 152. So the market is seeing goals in this game. Newcastle getting 3/4 goal head start. That's on the Asian handicap line. 3.5 the total. Unders favourites at 175. I mean, it is tough to get a read on both these teams. Newcastle feel a different team at home versus away. I know they lost against Brighton, but at least they created a lot more chances. Chelsea, solid. They played decent stuff at times against Liverpool. Could have maybe got a draw. So yeah, where are you at with these two sides?
Yeah, I'm starting to find, I'm starting to, I don't want to say this too confidently as a QPR
Too
fan, but
loud.
starting to find some joy in Chelsea, actually. Starting to feel like I'm starting to get them a little bit better now. And, it wasn't a strong selection at all, but putting them up at +1 against Liverpool last week. I was actually pleased with the selection process based on how that game played out. I thought they did all right, actually. And, well in the game for the most part, and I don't think a draw would have been an unfair result. So, having reached James back from injury was a big bonus, and now they get Cucurella and Fofana back from bans as well. So they've got options in that defence, and that's where they do need to improve upon. The eye test certainly doesn't fill you too much confidence about them defensively, as does their tally of just 2 clean sheets. But the data actually isn't too bad with them defensively, sort of a top 6 process defensively in terms of XG so far this season. And I think the direction of travel is positive. 4 wins and 2 draws if you take out the games against Liverpool and City, the top 2 teams. They're 5th on expected points, 4th in terms of XG supremacy, and only Liverpool have created more big chances. So, I looked at this game and I thought Chelsea on the nose at 185 to beat Newcastle. That's reasonable. I'm happy to back that, actually. You're right. Newcastle are a really puzzling team to work out. And early on in the season, they're picking up points and wins despite playing pretty poorly, whereas that's kind of flip reversed now because they were the better side by a clear stretch away at Everton, couldn't win, and then at home to Brighton, they were the better side and failed to score again. So just 1 point from the last 2 games when they played pretty well, actually, and played with sort of the urgency and incision, which have kind of been 2 characteristics that were lacking earlier in the season. So, a bit of composure, a bit of a clinical edge missing at the minute, but they generated over 2 expected goals against Brighton without reward. The midfield impressed that day, and in the last 4 league games now, they've generated around about 7.5 expected goals, but just scored twice. So perhaps the early season games are sort of balancing themselves out a little bit for Newcastle. But as you say as well, going away from home, away from St James's, I do feel they're a bit more fragile. 12 defeats in 23 away Premier League games since the start of last season, 1.96 goals per game conceded, 3 clean sheets in that 23-game sample. Managed only 4 points from 9 trips to top half teams last term. That's 7 defeats, 1 win, 1 draw. They conceded multiple goals in 7 of those 9, 3 goals or more in 5 of those 9. So, that's a concern. And, I kind of go back to their match away at Fulham not that long ago where they lost quite convincingly, actually. So, if Fulham can do that to Newcastle, I don't see why Chelsea can't. So, 185 on the nose on the home win.
Okay, keeping it simple with Chelsea, home win 185 in the 90-minute odds. And final game we're going to cover is Aston Villa versus Bournemouth, and we'll currently take a look at the betting we have on matchbook.com. 194 now, Villa. Bournemouth available at 4.1. The draw is also the same price. Both teams to score, yes. 163 again. The market expecting goals. Bournemouth get a half-goal head start at 204 on the Asian handicap line. 2.5 is the total. I mean, Villa just keep on winning. It's just been a great start to the season. We've talked about them, it seems, every week, Mark. The one vulnerability now, this may be not in the Champions League, at least goals-wise. I know the stats might say otherwise, but defensively, they still look a bit vulnerable at times from the goalkeeper to the fence. I know Martinez has had good games this season. Are you siding with Villa here, or are you going to go for the goals approach? Because you see a home to Bournemouth at 193. It looks a good price on paper. So where are you thinking for this?
I thought the same, but I feel like it's a trappy price. I think it's a kind of price where you think that's a nice price for Villa to beat Bournemouth. But there's a few factors to take into account, which means I'm not going to go near Villa this weekend. I got burnt backing them, confidently backing them at home to Manchester United days after they beat Bayern Munich. And that's kind of living long in my memory, actually, because it's probably a reminder of the new territory Villa are in, sort of Champions League midweek and then back to the Premier League grind at the weekend. And injuries are going to affect teams, of course they are, but and they did affect Villa that day against United. But it's more the fatigue element mentally and physically, expending so much energy on a Tuesday, Wednesday night and then going back to the grind again at the weekend. I'm quite happy to leave Villa alone for that reason. Still new territory for them. They've been brilliant for the most part. Best Premier League start for a century or since the last century. Started with 3 wins from 3 without conceding in the Champions League. Very, very impressive. But I just think of all the teams to benefit from having a full week's rest, compared to a side who've been involved in Champions League football, Bournemouth is probably the team you do not want to play, because the characteristics of the Cherries being so intense out of possession, pressing so high, looking to win the ball back as quick as possible. No side has actually made more tackles in the final third than Bournemouth, and you can see Lewis Cook and Ryan Christie so aggressive in that press from midfield. They're brave. They look to try and put you under pressure. And I think Villa, if they do suffer any potential mental or physical fatigue from midweek, there could be a bit of a come down. I know Tuesday to Saturday there's perhaps a bit of recovery time there, but I think Bournemouth could hurt them here. And they're fresh off that statement win against Arsenal. They're first against the top 6 team under Iraola. Well deserved. I thought they sort of hampered Arsenal even before the red card. And the issue for Bournemouth to have right now is just in the final third. They've been brilliant for the most part otherwise. And that's understandable, missing Solanke, and it's taking time for Evan Nilsson to settle. But they're fourth on expected points. Only 5 clubs have generated more expected goals than Bournemouth. Only 5 clubs have had more shots in the box. And only Man City and Spurs have had more shots altogether. It's all down to finishing. And I did a bit of digging into this. And they're 16th for expected goals versus actual goals ratio, 18th for shots on target percentage, and 15th for shots to goals conversion, which kind of goes to show they're just lacking a finishing touch at the minute. But I still like their prospects of getting on the score sheet here. Villa have kept only 5 home clean sheets in 23 league games going back to the start of last season. Bournemouth have scored in 19 of 23 away Premier League games under Iraola. So quite happy to have Bournemouth to score on side here. And I just think it'll be the potential to be an entertaining game. Bournemouth matches tend to be, and Villa games are too. As you mentioned, they're sort of flaws defensively, but they've got plenty of firepower in forward areas with Duran starting and scoring midweek and Watkins rested and coming off the bench. So I'll probably see that flip-flop this weekend. So my approach here is just to take the result out of the equation, back goals, and also oppose cards here. So over 2.5 goals and under 69.5 booking points, which should get you around about 1.95. So not far off evens. In terms of goals, 74% of Villa's last 23 home games and 74% of Bournemouth's last away games since the start of last season have gone over. There's actually 70% and 48% hit rates for over 3.5 goals in those samples as well. So quite fond of goals here, as the market is, but also like to oppose cards. Andrew Madley is the referee. He's one of the league's lowest card operators. He's given fewer than 70 booking points in 26 of his last 28 league games. And 74% of Premier League matches this season have gone under 6.5 cards. I know there's been a huge increase in cards in the Premier League, but he is definitely not one of those. And as I say, the league doesn't tend to see 7 cards or more too often. So just feels like a kind of smart way to get goals on side.
Yeah, that rest advantage, is Tuesday to Saturday, but similar to the Villa United game, that Wednesday to Sunday, wasn't it? So it's the same sort of rest. And that was before an international break. You'd expect one more big performance. So yeah, there is a slight low.
What's your thoughts?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that then, Dan? Because I think Bournemouth are the worst team you want to play if you are sort of on the back of a taxing Champions League tie.
And there's only so much you can prepare for a team when you've got a big fixture in midweek, isn't it? Milan was a big game for Villa, because if they got the win, like they did, top of the Champions League phase, whatever we want to call it. So, yeah, I did, like you thought, 196 or 193. Why are we not back in Villa? But yeah, I think it's probably the right play. Interesting on referees, you normally used to prefer the referees that didn't give cards, where I feel there's been a culture shift for us bettors the last couple of years, where we're saying that's a yellow ref, that's a yellow. So it's funny how that shifted, because from the good old days where you wanted refs to let the game go or play advantage and not call a foul, it's all flipped if you're backing in those bet builder markets. But yeah, the 5 games we've covered: drawn under 2.5 goals for Arsenal, Liverpool, Forest double chance and under 3.5 goals away to Leicester, over 2.5 goals and under 69.5 booking points Villa, Bournemouth, Brentford to win over 1.5 goals Brentford, and Chelsea to win against Newcastle. Insights.matchweek.com. Full recap of all the guys' picks, Mark's picks. And Mark, we will start in your EFL section with your beloved QPR against your mate Scotty Parker. I mean, this must be a lot to write this down and select this selection here.
Well, I'm not going to give him too much praise, but I will say, results-wise, Burnley have been pretty good so far this season. 6 wins already, just 4 goals against, or 5 goals against in 11 games now. On paper, it's looked very impressive, but they have overachieved a reasonable amount based on the balance of play. They're actually quite closer to mid-table than the top 3 in terms of expected points and expected goals, which is quite unremarkable, actually. They've just Parker's being helped by the sort of abundance of players and quality he's got at his disposal. And defensively, though, they have been good. 5 clean sheets in the last 7. And yeah, I do expect them to beat QPR at the weekend. I think they're a reasonable price to do so, but we can engineer a bigger price by adding in under 4.5 goals. So Burnley to win under 4.5 gets you around 1.91, 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, 2-1, and 3-1. All the most likely correct scores. On side there, their last 11 games have produced just 10 goals, and it's that sort of defence which has been keeping the scoring down, because 4 of the last 7 have produced a maximum of just 1 goal. And yeah, I look at QPR at the minute, and we're not doing a huge amount wrong despite the league position, but in both boxes we're just falling down, giving away really sloppy defensive errors and goals, struggling to sort of get the goals when we're on top of games. So QPR are actually amongst the league leaders for sort of shots on target, shots in the box, but the conversion rates have been just desperately poor and have proven really costly, particularly in home games. I think of Hull and Plymouth in particular. So we lost Kenneth Powell, our left back, to injury in midweek. The goalkeeper Nardi also seemed to be struggling at some point too. So yeah, slight concern. And look, Rangers are the BTTS kings of the division so far this season, but they don't often sort of escalate into really high-scoring games. And just one of Marty Cifuentes' 43 matches in the Championship have gone over 4.5 goals. So you tend to get a goal range between about 1 and 4 with QPR, normally sort of 2 or 3. But yeah, it just seems like a nice way of getting Burnley on side here, because they've won all 5 games against the current bottom 8, and QPR have lost 4 or 5 against teams in 16th and above, compared to just 1 defeat and 7 against teams in 17th and below. So I guess that's our range at the minute. So the bottom 8, bottom 10. So a game against Burnley is going to be quite a tough one. So yeah, I'm not expecting any points from Turf Moor this weekend.
Super. Scotty Parker's Burnley and under 4.5 goals against QPR at 191 or 10-11 in fractional terms. And then we're off to Brazil's Serie A for the second pick here.
Yeah, this is one of those sort of circumstantial selections. This league game is being sandwiched between 2 mega matches for Atletico Mineiro. On Tuesday night, they beat River Plate 3-0 in the first leg of their Copa Libertadores semi-final showdown. A huge result for them. The reverse game, though, takes place next midweek. So this is the match sandwiched in between them. They are playing Internacional, and I'm quite happy to oppose them in this game because of it. Domestically, they are 8 points adrift of Copa Libertadores qualification places. So clearly all the emphasis, all the priority is on the return game to Argentina against River Plate next midweek. So they've already booked their place in the Copa do Brasil final. That happened just days before the first leg of the Libertadores match. So they've had quite a heavy schedule of quite big matches. So I think the opportunity to rest, rotate, will be sort of welcome to Mineiro, and I think they'll put all their emphasis on next midweek, and that therefore presents a good opportunity for Internacional, who've got plenty on their plate already. They are the form team in Brazil, actually, over the last 12 games, going off a really impressive run of form. Goes beyond that 12-game streak, actually. They're 6th in the division. They're right in the mix for Libertadores qualification themselves. They've lost just once in 15 across all comps. More recently, in league football, 8 wins, 3 draws, 1 defeat. They've scored twice or more in 7 of their last 8 as well. And yeah, I think if they score in this game, it's unlikely they lose. They have lost just 6 games all season in Serie A, which is really impressive. And weirdly, 3 of those 4 away defeats they've suffered came against the bottom 4. So they tend to be quite good against better teams. So yeah, draw no bet, 1.7 on the away side. It's a little bit short for the show, but it's a price which will go up a lot shorter once the teams are announced. So yeah, happy to be with Internacional.
No, we usually say around the 1.7 mark is the cutoff point, but no harm putting one in here, Mark, of course, and comparing that with Burnley and under 4.5 goals in the section at 191 versus QPR. On to long shots, right? So it's going to be Serie A for long shots and best bets. You got Antonio Conte's Napoli, top of the league. Inter got a last-minute goal in the Champions League to win their game. Juventus were on the receiving end, 10-man Juventus, to lose their game against Stuttgart. They both play each other this weekend, 2nd and 3rd in the table. You're a man who generally supports goals when you're betting, or tries their best to support goals betting. I think this is the first time I've ever seen you put up a 0-0 on the podcast, or very close.
Really? Okay.
So I think so. If you think about it, I don't think so. Yeah, 0-0. So look, I thought it was a misprint initially, but it's the correct price, so it mustn't be. So tell us why there won't be a single goal scored in Inter versus Juventus this weekend.
Well, there might be a goal scored in Inter versus Juventus, but I think the chances of a 0-0 are much bigger than the 9-1, the 10.0, which is being offered to us on the correct score here. So, I'm not going to sort of shy away. I've put two winning long shots together in the last week, but they're both relatively short prices. You wouldn't probably consider them as massive long shots, but this is a long shot. I think it's got a great opportunity of winning. It's the Derby d'Italia, great occasion in Italy, a game I've always been quite fond of, but I'm not expecting fireworks in this. Well, perhaps there will be on the pitch, but not in terms of the score sheet. And yeah, there's a selection I'm really fond of, which I've put in my insights column, which will be available on Thursday afternoon, I'm sure. But in terms of a long shot, this is a great price to cheer on, considering the magnitude of the match, the teams involved, stylistically too. 9 of the last 11 meetings between these two teams have gone under 2.5 goals. 5 of those 11 and 3 of the last 5 have actually gone under 1.5 goals. They are traditionally quite tight. Don't see any reason why it wouldn't be tight again. The 0-0 has already banked in Juventus's match against Napoli under similar circumstances this season. And Juve's defensive process has been exceptionally good since Thiago Motta came in. Just looking at Serie A only, they're giving up just 0.43 expected goals, just 6 shots per game, 1.3 on target attempts per game, just 1 goal conceded in 8 games. Just extraordinary numbers, really. But they have only scored 11 goals of their own, and 3 of those 8 games, including that game against Napoli I mentioned, have ended 0-0 already. As you say, in midweek, Juve failed to score, lost 1-0 at home to Stuttgart. Inter required a late goal to win away at Young Boys, just 1-0. Inter shut out Roma last week, have kept 2 clean sheets in 4 home matches already, and they are the team for the big occasion, really, under Inzaghi. They do tend to raise their game, but I just think stylistically, the must-not-lose type attitude from both teams, considering how tight it is at the top of the end of the table at the moment. I cannot see this game sort of escalating into being a high-scoring game. So, yeah, I think the 0-0 at 9-1, 10.0 is worth a little interest.
Okay, that's a 5 p.m. kickoff on Sunday for anyone. Normally Serie A games are in the evening, but this game 5 p.m. So well worth tuning in, well worth keeping an eye on your respective score app to see the scores while watching maybe a bit of the Premier League action. Inter 0, Juventus 0, 10.0. Incidentally, the biggest sportsbook out there, 8.0. So you can see the big jump if you're betting correct scores on the exchange, and that goes across all football. I touched on Antonio Conte at Napoli. Mark, this is your best bet.
Yeah, I mean, he started his reign at Napoli, I should say, horrendously. They were thumped 3-0 at Verona on the opening day, but he hasn't really put a foot wrong since. Napoli are now top of the table, 19 points from the last 7 games. Only Juventus in Turin managed to thwart them in that 0-0 draw. They've only conceded 1 non-penalty goal in those 7 games and 1 non-penalty goal in 4 home fixtures all season. So they are a very short price to beat Lecce in Naples this weekend, quite understandably so, around about 135, I think. But we can turn that 135 price into 2.06 by backing Napoli to win and BTTS no. So Napoli to win without conceding. I've mentioned their own really impressive sort of defensive data this season under Conte, but Lecce are really struggling in the final third. So it's quite a happy marriage to this for me. Lecce thrashed 6-0 at home to Fiorentina last week. It's their 3rd straight defeat without scoring. They're now second bottom. They only scored 3 goals in 8 games. They're yet to score away from home, and they've lost without scoring at Inter, Milan, and Udinese already this season. Failed to score in 6 of 8 overall. All 6 of those games came against current top half teams, so they failed to score in 6 of 6 against the top half, and they're averaging just 5 shots in the box across their league campaign so far. So if you look at the 2 teams' BTTS no records this season, you've got a success rate of 13 from 16 games. In Serie A, but yeah, just include Napoli to win alongside that, and it boosts that price on both BTTS no and Napoli win to a really nice odds against offering at 2.06. So I think that's really good value. So happy to be with it.
Okay, yeah, looking forward to that. Quick word on El Clasico, Mark. Don't have a betting opinion, but looking forward to the game.
I am, yeah. I mean, Real Madrid are still sort of working themselves out a little bit. Really concerning sort of first hour or so in midweek. They pulled it round eventually, but yeah, Mbappe seems to be causing a few more problems and headaches than sort of positives at the minute for Real Madrid and Carlo Ancelotti. But yeah, flip it around, and Barcelona are going great guns at the minute, and we referenced him before the Champions League, but Rafinha is one of the best players in Europe right now, absolutely flying, and that midweek hat trick just proves it, really. So yeah, fascinated to see how it goes. the home team rarely prospers in Classico football over the last sort of decade or two, which is quite an interesting wrinkle. But yeah, quite happy to sort of leave it alone and just try and enjoy the contest and get an early sort of picture on where these two teams are at. Now the standard has increased. Barca will fancy their chances after what they did midweek to Bayern, but I don't think Real Madrid will be quite so useless at the back. So yeah, should be an interesting one.
Yeah, they don't have Vincent Kompany managing them. Yamal was superb as well, even though he only got 1 assist, Yamal, but he was just a joy to watch.
Unreal, isn't he? The amount of talent they've got in young players. The issue is you've got to enjoy them now because Barca are going to burn those players out before they get to 21. So, yeah, sad state of affairs, really. But yeah, enjoy it while we can.
Cool. Before we go, League of Ireland title race hotting up there Friday night. There's gonna be a lot of good games. I will mention Pat's 2.4 home to Derry is probably too big for them. Just anyone who's listening, just check out the form guide. And if you haven't been familiar with the League of Ireland title race, it's going to be superb the next 2 Friday nights. But Mark has mentioned his Insights column that'll be available from Thursday afternoon. Insights.matchbook.com. We'll have a full recap of these picks plus NFL horse racing. It's a busy week on the Matchbook podcast, so check out your feed for all our betting content. We will be back this same time, same place next week with Adrian Clark to preview another weekend's football. But until then, enjoy the weekend. Bye bye.